I don't think I...
Nan was the one.
Nan was Uncle Johnny's.
So we are talking about Nan.
And then
Nan is Uncle Johnny's child.
my mother too.
John and Ann Wallace's daughter.
Yes, Annie Wallace's daughter.
Yeah.
And also John. John from that family was not
Strange.
complete.
So we had some, just to kind of reiterate,
Well, she's just calm, talking.
we've got some mental issues with John's daughter Nan,
And also his son John, the young
and
one.
his son John also had some
Well, yeah,
mental issues.
he wasn't very
Yeah,
bright.
John too. Yeah.
We've got issues with Julia, mental issues with Julia.
Yeah.
And then Nell and John Corbett's son Dan
Yes.
commits suicide, and Margaret is also mentally challenged. Anybody else in the family?
I never knew about Margaret.
I hope
Was that it?
I'm not. Well, see, that's why I think about Joey. You see, there may be
Your
some,
sister Jovita?
Yeah, there may be something.
Yes, there could be.
See, somebody like a gene. She may have one of the genes. You
Yes.
see, because her son Mark is son Mark. You see, is a bit retarded.
Yeah.
I mean,
Really?
he's not 100%. You see, he had to go to a special school, and
he?
oh yes, and he didn't get his grade 12 though. But he always just he wasn't able to, and he never made his first communion. I don't know why,
Well,
but
she didn't take him to church.
but she wasn't going to church then.
Yeah.
But I can't understand why Mike didn't see that he did, and. But see, he's not just. And then Patty Ann. Pat's one of Pat's girls.
Yeah.
Patty Ann is another one that's not.
One of Evelyn's
Yes.
girls.
You know, it's hard to
pretty
put.
though, wasn't she?
Hey?
She was a real premature baby though, wasn't she? I remember when she was.
Yeah,
tiny.
well, she was premature, but
Yeah.
that wouldn't make her that way, and not
my daughter's
necessarily.
not
She's not as.
But she's not. There's something.
other things
You see,
there
there's
was.
something missing. You can't put your finger on it.
Right.
You know,
You're just not quite right.
You're not just quite 100%. You know, they can look after themselves. Like Nan could could support herself in a way. Like
She was a great babysitter. That's what she did.
and Mark is
care
the
of
same.
children.
Mark was a good worker under direction. He can work. In a factory, you see, and they said he's a very faithful worker and very good and everything, but there's just something not right about him.
Yes.
You just can't put your finger on it.
Yes.
And that's the way a lot of them were. Like the same with John, Uncle Johnny's young John was the same, you see, and
Yes.
and Nan, you
Nan.
see.
And that family.
But Margaret was really queer. Aunt Nellie's girl, Margaret.
Now, I never met her. I never knew
They
about
probably didn't talk about her. You did if
Yeah.
you had some. I mean, because they really didn't talk a lot about Julia. Dad just in hushed tones. She was referred to.
Isn't
and
it
Dad
funny? I
said,
never heard of her. Isn't
Well,
it funny?
Ju-
I didn't know her at all.
Julia would have been your aunt. Your father's sister, Julia.
Oh yes, oh yeah.
Yes.
Well, she's another one.
Right.
She was able to hold a job, like as being a housekeeper.
Yes.
And support herself that way.
Yes.
But you see, there was something missing there in her too. You see, so there seems to be a little mental streak in them, and that's why I'm thinking about, because Joey doesn't, to me, act like a normal person.
Your sister, Jovita.
Jovita. This thing of not
she
wanting to have
doesn't.
any, any contacts with human beings. She's never kept in touch. She has no female friend that she
I was
talks
just going
to.
to say that she has no female
And
friends.
see that's what I said to Jeannie. I said, Joey has no female woman that she talks to. Well, she said, I know, but she doesn't want one. She says, oh, that's all right, you see. Well, I said, yes, Jeannie, but that's not normal behavior. I said, we're social beings. And I said,
That's
that's not
true.
normal.
But maybe it's something she can't help.
Oh, you
Yeah.
can't. They can't help
can't
it. When,
help it,
if it's a
right.
mental thing, they can't help.
Yes.
But it's still exasperating for people to have to deal with
It's
them.
difficult for family to deal. it's very difficult for family members
Well,
to
it's
deal
very
with them.
difficult for me,
Yes.
especially if you get to the stage where you're the only family you have,
I
and it's so
know.
embarrassing
Of
because
course.
people don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
But my friends can't get over the fact that they won't do anything for me. They don't try to do anything for me. She came for my 90th birthday. She never brought me a darn thing. I didn't care, but just for the sake of the people here, they all brought me gifts. She didn't even give them as much as $5 to pay towards the food. And Mike's
Yeah, that's
Mike's a
odd.
multimillionaire.
I know, Margaret.
And she could have sent flowers,
I know.
As I said, I didn't want anything, but it's just for
But
the.
don't you
And
think,
then
Agnes, don't you think there's a lot of jealousy there? I think Jovita is self-centered. It's probably almost impossible for her to be a giver.
well, now she doesn't.
She doesn't
I
know
do
how to
think
be a
she's
giver.
jealous about this fuss they're making about my memoirs because every time they come and say anything, she'll bring up the same subject, which isn't the same thing at all. See, Mike had a store. And then he built a new store. And when he built the new store, naturally for the opening, he invited the press. And he had a famous hockey player, come and sign cards,
Wow.
to draw the crowd.
Yes.
And of course, he had the press there, so they wrote a big write-up. The local paper was full of all this.
Yeah.
Now that was the one event, you see. And then she said, "Oh, well, you're not the only one in the family." She said, "That's got some notice." She said, the same thing. Mike had his picture in the paper and write up in the paper and all. You see, it's not the same thing at all.
No.
And I said,
Well, there's just
and I said
competition.
she was saying this to Susie, and I said to Susie, "That's not the same thing,
I know, Margaret.
But I don't know
Excuse
whether
me,
the
Agnes.
kids understand that even. That's not the same thing at all as what, But she says this every time, she brings this up every time. So
Well, she's definitely got a problem.
Yeah.
She's a recluse. She has no friends, Agnes. I really feel that she's jealous of you. With all your friends, with your loving, open personality.
Yeah, when I tell her, if I tell her anything about my friends coming, anything, there's dead silence. I feel like saying, "Are you there?" Like if it's on the phone.
Anybody home?
Yeah, yes. She there's no response whatsoever.
I
She
know.
doesn't say that's nice or did you have a nice time or
Because
that
she
was
can't
nice of
say
her.
that.
Or, there's dead silence. I'll say I do it purposely too to see. I'll say, "Oh, Maxine was in or something like this, and she brought me this or something." Dead
Dead
silence.
silent.
And anytime I say anything or when I tell her anything that. If there's anything that's sort of positive about it, there's dead silence. She never says anything.
So, Agnes, can I ask a favor of you?
Yes.
I know very little about my great-grandmother, Annie Murphy Hardigan, except that she was a wonderful woman. Do you remember her at all? Can you tell me about her?
I remember her. I was about 5 years old, 5 or 6, and I came home from school one day, and Aunt Ann and Jackie,
My father
your father, and Helen,
and my grandmother Helen.
and your grandmother Helen were there.
They were there for a visit.
And they were there, and school wasn't out yet, but it was in June. It was almost the end of the season and I came home from school, and I didn't even know at that age that I had these relatives, and they were there, and they stayed all summer.
They stayed all summer.
They stayed all summer. They stayed for the rest of June,
How long
July.
would my father have been?
August, and at the end of August, your aunt, your grandmother,
My grandmother Helen.
no, your
My great-grandmother
Aunt Ann and Jackie, your father, went back to Oswego, and Helen stayed on for another month. Now, I'll tell you all that I can remember. I remember, and of course, in those days, they didn't phone or write or anything. They just landed in, you see.
Came and left.
They just landed in. And the problem was Helen and her husband had a fight.
My grandfather, Walter Ryan.
Walter
Yes,
Ryan.
Were they having difficulties then?
They had
Okay, I kind of thought that's what was going on.
difficulties in the
Say it like
family.
it is.
and
I kind of thought that's what was
and
going
she
on.
came home to her parents.
Yeah, so
but
my
she-
father would have been about 5, perhaps.
Well, that's how I remember.
Because that's when
I
she
thought it
left
was
him.
2. He was still in diapers, though. I see.
Oh, then they were having difficulties.
He was
because I
Yeah.
remember her.
Okay, so he was in diapers. My
He was
dad.
still in diapers because
Okay.
I could remember Aunt Ann washing out the diapers and
Okay.
hanging them on the line. you
Well,
see.
then-
That's why I thought he was only about 2 or something.
Yes, well, she finally left my grandfather when my father was
Yeah.
5. So they were having difficulties a good 3 years earlier.
Yes.
They were having difficulties
Yes,
in their marriage.
and she was afraid that his father would come and kidnap him because I remember that was so exciting. I had never heard of, something like that. To me, it was. You see, I was just a kid. You see, I was listening to these
If you knew my grandfather, you'd know how laughable that was. That he would try
My mother
kidnapping.
Is that a-
drama-
yeah,
my
well,
mother-
He was very easygoing.
Was he?
With not a lot of
Well,
drama.
now this is what
My mother was
this,
the drama.
this is what they told.
I'm sure.
This is what they said. You see,
So she was kind of hiding out. My
yes,
grandmother.
yes, and they thought they'd get out of the country because
out
they
of
were
the
afraid
country.
he'd come and kidnap him.
My father.
So they came over. So they came over here, and that was a secret, over there. That nobody's supposed
They
to know
were on
where
the
they.
lam.
My business.
And they were in the woods. They were in the woods with us,
They were undercover. They were hiding out.
And you
in
see
Canada.
another thing, Aunt Ann
God.
felt that they always the Murphys in the States all felt that property and more or less belonged to them. You see, there was friction between my father and the whole Murphy family all their
Really?
lives.
Because
and I never, as a kid,
Because
I never.
he had the farm. Because he had the farm.
Well, because he got the farm. You see, when he married my mother, his mother, Margaret, who married this Patrick Murphy, she gave him the farm for $1. In
I
those
see.
days.
Yeah, if he took care of them. Wasn't there Izzy and Lizzie and Lizzie weren't your father had the farm, but he had to take care of Izzy.
Now, I'm going to tell
And
this.
Lizzie, okay.
She gave him for $1 because that was just of the transaction. But there were conditions connected.
Sure, of
Now, there
course.
was this Aunt Lizzie and Biddy and Annie,
Yeah.
and they were getting up in years, and the conditions were that Daddy and Mother, Dan and Margaret, were to look after these old aunts.
Were
And
they Hannafins?
they were Hannafins.
They were Hannafins,
And they had
okay.
to, the stipulation was that they had to look after them until they died and bury them. But he got the house, you see.
He earned the house. I think he earned the house.
Well, you see, he felt that way.
Yeah.
And you see, he used to say, I used to hear them all. See, I used to just listen. And he was to say, the 2 troublemakers in the family, he said, are Mary and Ann. You see, they're the 2 eldest girls, you see.
So my great-grandmother
and Bossy and Mary.
and Bossy and
Well, you see, they felt that was unfair. They
I
thought,
see.
why was he given that farm?
I
you see, that they all should have a share in it.
Yes.
You see, you could see this, this problem. So every summer when he'd go over there, my mother would be holding her breath because they never knew if they're going into a fight.
A fight.
Because
Okay.
that was the Murphys.
Okay.
And they'd bring up this darn subject all the time about this same old
The
thing.
farm.
And Daddy thought that he was hard done by because he felt that he didn't get very good deal out of it, you see. And they felt that he got
Everything.
too good a deal.
I felt he got everything. And yet it sounds like he had to work for
He
what
had
he
to
got.
take care of those 2
And,
aunts.
and then you see, he sort of felt that they felt that farm sort of half belonged to them, and that they could just come over and stay there, or whatever.
Yes.
You see. And so that was this caused that friction all through their lives.
Yeah,
you see.
so they couldn't really be close because there was always
No, because there was
that in the air whenever they
that's
got
right.
together.
That's
so.
right. And there was, my mother.
So, with the summer that my father, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother spent with you must have been very kind of difficult.
Well, well, anyway, they stayed there. Well, they got into some arguments.
I bet.
They got into fights because, you see, I remember as a little kid,
Do you remember the
hearing them
arguments over the farm?
hearing them having these arguments with Aunt Ann and everything. Well, then she, but I didn't know what it was all about.
Well, you were little.
Because I was too young,
little.
you know. But
if my father was 2, you were what, maybe 7?
well, the little guy, you know, your father was only about
In diapers.
5 years old.
Well, that summer that he spent with you, you said he was still in diapers, so
Yes.
yes.
He was about 2 or 3 then, right?
Well, no,
He
he
was
must
in
have been.
diapers. He was-
I thought he was only, but you said he was about.
Well, no, I said that when my grandmother finally left my grandfather, Walter Ryan, my father was 5. But she evidently was having
Oh
trouble.
yes, she hadn't yet left him.
This was 3 years earlier.
No, she just ran away from him
She
because
ran away. But then she must have gone back to him.
I think she did.
She did.
Yes, she went back to him.
Yes, and they lived in Syracuse.
Yes.
In a place on Tipperary Hill.
Now, is that
Because my grandfather, Walter Ryan, was as Irish as can be also.
was it? Now apparently he was now Big Lil spoke very well of him. She always said that Helen was crazy to not to get along with him and she said he was a very nice man.
He was a nice man.
And he was a good provider. He had a good job.
He was a lovely man.
He
actually.
worked in a china shop or
Yes,
something,
a
didn't
Syracuse china.
he? See?
I have a set of it at home that he gave to me.
Is that right?
I have a set of it.
Well, I remember
Yes.
that.
Yes, you're sharp.
And,
You know, Agnes, they just weren't right for each other.
No.
They just
But no. Do you know what the trouble was? They said that Helen was spoiled rotten.
Well, yes, there was
And
that.
also she married him very young.
Very young.
And there was quite a difference
She
in their
was-
ages, wasn't there?
Only really a few years, but
Oh.
she was very young. She had my father at what? She was not quite 20, maybe, or just turned 20. So she was 19 when she got married.
Yeah.
My grandfather would have been maybe 2 or 3 years older.
Yeah, but they said that he was a type who
He was- his temperament
wanted to
was-
settle down
Yes.
and have a nice married life. And,
he
Helen loved to dance.
She did. She
And
was
she
spirited.
used to go out to dances on her own, and then she'd have somebody bringing her home. Well, what man would put up with that?
I know.
know.
They
You know?
just weren't right for each
No,
other. They
no.
really just weren't right for
Oh,
each other.
But in those days, it was it was really something for them to.
It was I bet it was a scandal when she left my
Likely,
grandfather.
yeah.
I bet it was.
Sure.
I'm
That's a
sure it
word.
was a whoa.
Yeah. Yes, because it wasn't done in
It
those
wasn't
days,
done,
you see.
you know.
And
Then she,
This would have been, my father was born in 25. This would have been around 1930 that she left him.
oh,
So
and
yes.
she brought your
And she
father
brought my
to
father.
grandmother.
She brought my father, of course, with her. And then she had to go to work.
Then she left and lived in Syracuse.
what did
so-
she work at?
She
The
worked.
telephone company.
That's how she was working for the telephone company in Syracuse when she met my grandfather.
Right.
Yeah.
But when she left him and came back to Oswego,
Oh, that's
she
right.
worked at a company called Taggart's. It employed half the city of
It was a
Oswego.
factory.
Yeah.
And that's
Remember
when
that?
she pretty much, my father really bonded with my great-grandmother because she pretty much raised him. My grandmother, Helen, was working. My father was at home with his grandparents, John Hardigan and Annie Hardigan, Annie Murphy Hardigan.
Yes.
So really, he almost looked to Annie as his mother.
Oh, I'm sure. And she looked. And that.
And she adored him.
And that. Oh, she did.
She adored him.
And that summer, she looked after him all summer.
I
you
know.
see, Helen was sort of irresponsible type, you know. And
She was on vacation when she was there.
oh
It was a
yeah.
summer vacation.
But I remember the big hats she had.
Yes,
that was
I
in
know.
style, and
I
she had
know.
big hats. And when she'd go to church on Sunday, she'd get all dressed up, and she looked so beautiful. And
Oh,
everything,
she was a
you know.
knockout.
Oh, she was.
My Aunt Gloria looks just
She looks just
like
like
her.
her,
Yeah,
just
she
like her.
does.
stunning woman. Even
She-
to this day.
Yeah, the last time she was over, the
Yes.
time she was here and I saw her,
Yes.
she was. You just think she was Helen again. Yeah.
I know.
She was, but now that's how see. I have a good memory,
You do have a good memory.
but I can remember these things.
Now, I've been told that my great-grandmother, Annie, was a great storyteller. Do you remember her telling stories?
Well, I remember that she was an interesting, outgoing type of personality. But my father was a lot the same, and I tell that in my memoirs. He could entertain people for hours.
It's a Murphy thing. Well,
He tell stories. He used to tell ghost stories.
Yes.
But that's what my grandmother
So did Annie.
Yeah. Well, you see, they were a lot alike like that. And my father was a life of parties.
So was Annie.
He would call off for square dances,
Yes.
and he played different instruments all by
I've
ear.
heard the Murphys are
all by
very
ear,
musical.
of course.
I've heard the Murphys are a
They
musical
all
clan.
did that.
They nearly all played something. The mouth organ, Big Lil played the mouth organ. She played the violin. They could either step dance or play an instrument or sing or tell funny stories, you know, like that young John. You know, you heard of young John Murphy and Laura, eh? Young John, who was Anna Murphy's parents, and they had two sons, Jack and George.
Now,
do you know about them?
Which branch is that?
Young John. They called him Young John. I don't know who.
Which one is this a child of one of the 8 Murphy children?
No, no. I don't know who this Young John. Who was his father?
Now, weren't they cousins? I remember my mother's talking about a John and a George.
Young John. Who was his father?
And one of them died on out near the loop there, coming down that what's the name of that road? That
Snake Swamp?
No, when you're going out around the loop or out by Barbara's, that big road that comes down the hill there. One of them was killed there. I think it was George Murphy, or George, I think.
Now, the George and Jack were both in the services during World War
My father was.
II.
My father was, yes.
And your father
When you
was.
say Jack, are you talking about my dad?
Yeah,
no,
but I'm talking about this Jack Murphy that belonged to this Young John.
There's another Murphy. Now, I don't know if they were cousins.
He was a cousin.
Right,
This young John was a cousin, but I don't know who his parents were.
I don't either.
And he was married to her name was Laura, and she had a sister, a school teacher. They were very prim and proper. And this school teacher lived with them. And
now wait a minute. Were they related to? Remember Fred, Uncle Fred, that we lived with?
The Hardigan. He was a Hardigan, wasn't he?
He was a Hardigan. No. Okay, so we're talking my grandfather.
We're talking about Annie's
You're right.
husband, John Hardigan's clan. The Hardigans. I wanted to ask you about him, too, if you'd ever met him and you remember.
I met him.
Helen's father.
I saw him.
John Hardigan.
I remember him. He was quite a good-looking man.
Yes, he was a handsome man.
Or a handsome, I would say. I can remember him, the black eyebrows. You see, I was just a little kid, but
I understand he was very
I
quiet.
remember young John.
Very quiet.
Very quiet.
Well, Aunt Ann was a talker.
And
So he was quiet.
Yeah.
is she connected with
Yes. Yes. Beverly's got it.
Pardon?
Anna DeRosie. Wasn't her father young John?
Anna DeRosie.
Anna DeRosie.
Oh, yes. Her father was Young John.
Young John
Murphy.
Yeah.
Young John Murphy.
They called him Young John to
Yes, they did.
differentiate, you see.
Differentiate. And there was a George Murphy.
George, he had two sons, George and Jack.
Right, and one of them
and then Anna, this Anna who married. What was his name?
We're talking Murphys.
Murphy.
Yeah, their names.
Which line are we talking?
Okay. Anna DeRosa was married to.
Who was her parent?
Wait a minute.
Her parents was this Young John Murphy and Laura. You see, this Young John. They called him Young John Murphy.
But who was his father? Or
see,
mother?
that's what I don't know.
I got a John and Ann Wallace. That line?
No. I don't know who his parents were.
I don't know either.
It wouldn't have been Mary. It wouldn't have been your.
No. It was nobody that I know of. That
okay,
I
so
don't.
We're not quite sure how he.
We're not sure how
they fit
came
in.
into the family.
we're not sure how these other Murphys fit into
No,
the
I
family.
don't know where he came from. I just know he was a cousin.
He used to come out to the farm. when
Oh
Father
yeah.
Tim came home.
Oh, he used to come to the
Yeah.
parties. You see, he used to always come to the
And
parties.
he had two.
He was a great storyteller and step dancer
Yes, he
and
did.
and singer and everything.
I don't know who his parents.
This young John.
Yeah, I
you,
don't
you,
know.
you didn't know him?
I did. Yes, I knew. I remember him.
But I know, but
And
where
he had
did,
two sons, and one of them was killed on that. My mother used to tell me that story all the time. He was a very handsome
oh, he was tall.
man, and
he was tall
killed
and
on that big hill. As you go out
no,
of
what did
town.
they had a lovely home.
Well,
I visited
I
their
don't know who
home.
his parents were.
Stayed overnight there with this Anna.
it must be some
Anna
relation,
Murphy?
some relative, or
Well, he
some
did- he was-
descendant from maybe Patrick had a brother. Patrick Murphy. Did he have a brother?
I don't know. You
In
see,
the- in
I
the-
see. I don't know.
But
I don't know
there
where
were
this
a
young
dad
John
and two
came
sons,
from.
and one of them was killed on that
Yeah.
hill.
I don't
Okay.
know where he lived on the other side of the city of Oswego, and they had a nice big home. Because I remember, I stayed overnight there different times, and they had a lovely
Think of the name
big
of that
home.
road.
And
Right
this
there.
Hall
Anna,
Road? Are you talking the Hall?
No.
What road?
It's on the way out to Barbara's up
Okay.
the hill.
So,
And-
anyways, we were talking about my great grandfather, John Hardigan. He was very quiet, wasn't he?
very quiet,
quiet.
and he was a handsome man,
And very handsome.
very handsome, and very quiet because Aunt
Who did my
Ann,
grandmother
Aunt
look
Ann was a
like?
talker like this.
Which one did my grandmother Helen look like? More like her mother or her father?
I think she looked more like her father.
Like her father. Okay.
I think, you know, do you know what I liked about her? She had, now you'll find this interesting. There was something about her eyes that was, I've
we
only,
talking
I've
about
only
Helen?
met, this is Helen. This
Yes.
is I've only met one other person in my life that had the same expression from their eyes that she
Yeah.
had. And there was something about it, I can't describe it or anything, and they were just blue, they were blue eyes.
They were eyes that would take the color of whatever she was wearing. They could look gray at times.
I don't know about that, but there was an expression in the eyes.
That would be divilment.
That would be what?
That would be divilment.
But anyway, when I have to tell you this.
But they were beautiful eyes.
They were,
She had
well, and there was
gorgeous
this expression that made them that way. And when I went to Moose Jaw, we had a woman in the sewing room, and when the first time I saw her, right away I thought of Helen. She had the same kind of eyes, and I used to be so embarrassed. I had to stare at her every time I saw
I know.
her, and stare at her
eyes.
because
No, my grandmother had beautiful
she
eyes.
had the same eyes as,
Yes.
and I never saw them anywhere else in
Yes.
my life before or since. But that woman in the sewing room had that same
Wow.
kind of expression. It was hard to describe. Did you notice a special?
Yes, my grandmother had beautiful eyes, and my mother, by the way, her name was Clara May Hubbard, who married Johnny.
Yes.
She always said that my grandmother had beautiful eyes and
Did she-
passed them down to all the family. Shirley, Gloria, that they were just very outstanding eyes. That they were eyes that drew you in.
Now, see, I noticed that.
My mother said that about her eyes.
Did
so,
she?
Yeah, so you're not alone.
So imagine.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that that's
Yes.
interesting
I know.
that you would tell me that because
Yes.
I thought maybe there was something about me, you know.
No, my
But-
mother said the same thing.
And it was only that one other woman in my life
Yes.
that I met that had
Wow.
that same kind of. I can't describe what it is.
It's just very
It's like an
outstanding.
expression, not
Yes.
because her eyes were just blue like anybody
Well,
else's.
her mood swings. You can see right in her eyes. Her mood swings. My mother had mood swings.
Mood swings.
She had what?
My grandmother could be kind of moody, Shirley is saying, and
Yeah,
you can
yeah,
see that in
yes,
her
you
eyes.
could.
The minute I would look at her, I knew.
No, that expression was always there, and it was lovely.
Very,
you know?
Very intelligent.
Yes.
Very full of life.
Yes.
Full of life.
I don't-
And twinkle. They almost, when she would laugh, those eyes would almost twinkle. Gloria. I see, and Shirley
Yeah.
got similar eyes.
Yes.
They're
Shirley's
really
eyes are similar.
beautiful, and she must have gotten those eyes from her father, John Hardigan.
That's what I
It's not a
I
Murphy
remember
eye,
him.
it's a-
He had nice black
Yes.
eyebrows, and isn't it funny? His eyes stand out in my mind
So
too.
that is a Hardigan
So
trait.
So it must have been the Hardigan trait.
It's
you
a
see.
Hardigan trait.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I remember him with his eyes.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, he's a
Now I
handsome
was
man.
only a kid. I was only about.
And yet that made an impression on you.
And
Made
she
an
used
impression.
to
I was-
always say, I'm just like my father, I can't help it. My mother used to always
Oh.
say that. And
Well-
then my brother told me one time she was nothing like her father or her mother.
well, I don't know, but yeah, isn't it funny? You know, when
that
I think
is.
of it now, I was only about 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah, her eyes.
But
had you
then I remember these
mesmerized.
things, you know. Isn't it funny how
No,
the thing
I
would make
always-
an impression on you
Yeah.
when you're
Yes.
a kid? You
I
know?
always felt the same way about my grandmother's eyes. I thought they were just
Oh.
the most
Well,
intriguing.
You must have been interested to hear me say
yes,
that, eh?
and my mother always said the same thing.
Is that right?
Something about those eyes.
Well, I wasn't going to because I thought it was something, you know, that about
No, I'm glad
me.
you mentioned it.
Yeah, well,
I'm very glad you
I
mentioned
remember
it.
that.
So when was the last...
You can tell Gloria sometime.
I will.
I could see the same in Gloria's
Gloria's
eyes.
looks just like my
Yeah,
grandmother.
she does. Yeah.
does.
Just like...
But
Now,
Yes.
with my grandfather Hardigan, on my grandfather's side, he had a brother, Fred Hardigan, that we lived with for a while. Fred Hardigan, my grandfather's brother. He had other brothers too, I think.
Yeah,
my
there were other-
grandfather. I can't think of who they were.
Well, these are not... This is not Murphy.
no, it's not Murphy.
This would be Anna's
But she-
Anna's brother-in-law, Fred.
I
Oh,
only
yes.
brought it up because I know Agnes.
yeah, I just remembered that he was very quiet. I never remember him
Yes.
saying 2 words.
No.
But I remember him. I could see him still sitting there at the table.
Yes.
And I can remember these eyebrows.
Yes.
And all that.
Like Tyrone Power's eyebrows.
And he had white hair when
Yes,
when I
very-
saw him,
yes.
but black eyebrows,
And outstanding eyes.
and outstanding.
Outstanding
So
eyes.
She must have got them from him.
I think
he
she
worked
must
on
have.
the railroad, right? Didn't he work on the railroad?
I don't know, but I think he had quite a good job or
I
something.
think it was
yeah.
a railroad conductor or something.
But you know, I often thought. I often wondered what my life would have been like had my mother gone with my father
the
over
United
to Buffalo.
States.
You know, because he was.
Because that's where your father was working, and
he
Buffalo
was
was
a streetcar conductor at the time.
Who knows, Agnes? Who knows what would have happened? It's interesting to think about.
Yes. I often think about it because, you know, Daddy used to talk about it. Daddy mentioned it. I heard my father mention it, and then Big Lil told me too. So, but he used to go over and visit his grandparents, you see, and that was his downfall. Because, you see, I guess when he'd come over, he'd go to these parties that this Annie Mullen had, you see, these house parties.
Yeah.
And my mother would go into them, you see, because she only lived a mile away, you see, so that's how they met, you see.
So you know what I was thinking too. Now, how far back have we gone? Just to my.
We've gone to
great-grandparents.
Ireland. We have gone to Ireland.
So we've got
They lived
back into Ireland now.
Mary
who were-
Lee and Tom and
and
Tim
who were their
Hannafin.
parents? Going back.
What did you
Do you,
say?
so do you know anything about Mary Lee's family?
No, I know nothing
Except
about.
that she was English, or
Acting.
perhaps Welsh. We're not sure.
And the one thing I know about her, Big Lil said she was a smart woman, and that the bank manager. Now this was something in those days because women didn't do this. She said the bank manager said that she was a smarter woman, smarter than men. She did the business. She looked after the business
Really?
of the finance. And Big Lil told me that the manager at the bank praised her up for her knowledge and her business ability.
So she was living in County Cork. That's how they met. Mary
Well, I don't know where she came from.
But I mean,
Yeah,
she
because
must have
she
been
was,
living there.
Yeah, maybe.
She must have been living. And
Even though she was English
So we're-
and Welsh.
Well, of course, there were there were English people over in Ireland, you know.
Yeah,
there were.
Oh yes.
When the Catholic their lands were taken away from them, the Catholic Irish, the English, some of them came over
yes,
and took their property.
they tried to take away these things. Yes.
Do you know that if Tim Hannafin ever went to England, traveled?
I don't know. You see, I don't know.
So how did those two meet, I wonder? How did Mary Lee and Tim Hannafin meet? I'm just
Tim Hannafin came over from Ireland, you see.
Yes, I know, but he came over with Mary Lee. They were running away.
Yes.
I'm just wondering how they met. She was a bank manager. Was she working in Ireland or in
No,
England?
no, it didn't say she was a bank manager, but the bank manager, she did the business of the family over in Canada here, and the bank manager in Canada praised her up for her business ability.
Okay.
And but she just, I don't know what she did or anything about her parents. I just know that according to Big Leo, that the two of them eloped from Ireland and came over here.
They eloped from Ireland, so she must have been living there.
So she must have been living over there, and and got to know him somehow, and they came over here. And this is what Big Lil told me, that the family disapproved of and you see, it was because in those days the English and Irish, you see.
There's a lot of bad blood there.
But
do we know anything about Tim Hannafin's parents?
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
No, I don't know anything about Tim at all. I don't know.
So you don't know, like, County Cork, but you don't know where in County Cork.
And I don't know anything about them. And the Hannafins that are in Reed, I think, were derived from this Tim Hannafin. See, from his son. He had a son named Tim too. You see, and his son must have gone out.
So Margaret wasn't
come off
the
to
only
Reed.
child.
You see.
Okay.
So as far back, we can go just as far as that.
That's as far back, Jackie, that I know that and I only got this information, as I said, when I was 65 from Big Lil. You see, my parents told us nothing as children. They never told us anything.
It was a need to know. They only told you if you needed to know, right?
So then
Well, I wish I had remembered to ask her more questions, you see. I should have, you see, but because at that time she was willing to tell me the things, you see. And that's why I used to love to go over there in the summer and visit her.
Sit on the veranda.
We'd sit on the veranda and we'd talk away, and watch the little kittens climbing up and down the
trees.
But you see, sometimes when people get older, they'll talk more, you see, and she told me these things, you see, because I was interested, and but I'm sorry I didn't ask her more questions.
Oh, Agnes, you've given me more information than I had.
So then you can pick it up.
Well, I hope so.
Yes.
I didn't have very much, but
that's backwards.
I can remember, hearing these things.
And I'm spelling Hannafin correctly, I hope. Hannifan.
Hannafin. That's correct.
A-N or I-N, yeah?
You're very good. You took that down very well. I hope you did.
And Lee is just L-E-A?
L-E-A, I guess.
L-E-A?
I think it would be L-E-A.
Okay.
I think... I don't know whether it's L-E-A or L-E-E. I don't know how the English spells that.
Yeah.
I just know that that's her name, how to pronounce it, But she was a smart woman, so we must have some of her genes.
I think we probably do.
And she was good in business, you see, and that was something in those days. You see, women didn't do those things.
Women,
no,
they
in
were
those
given
days.
no chance of becoming educated. So for a bank manager to praise her like that,
the bank manager praised her. That's what Big Lil
She did
told
her
me.
family business.
Yes.
I'm wondering if her father had passed away, and that's why.
I don't know.
Maybe
you see.
because I can't imagine she would be conducting the family business if the father was still alive. He wouldn't have probably alive. He would have been doing that.
Well, no, but she did this with her husband. This Hannafin.
Oh, okay.
You see, that was the way it was. She was married to this Tim Hannafin after they overcame over here. Instead of this Tim Hannafin doing the business, she did the business.
I see.
That was it.
I see.
You see that she did the business.
And now
Instead of this Tim Hannafin.
What did Tim Hannafin do?
Yeah. She looked after the business, and
What was the business?
and this bank manager, I suppose, in
business?
Deseronto there.
What business did Mary Lee and Tim Hannafin?
Well, the business of the farm,
The
you know,
farm,
or what
okay.
because they had this farm. You see, they're the ones who had this big farm that stretched from the one concession to the other. You know, with the Salmon River. That's the one that my father
farm
inherited.
here.
You see, from his mother.
So that was like a business for him?
I suppose, well, whatever business they'd have to look
Whatever
after in those
paperwork
days.
or legal business was necessary
I don't,
to
I
keep
don't know
the
what
farm.
it was, but she just said that she got that he gave her great praise and said she was very knowledgeable,
A smart woman.
very competent person. I just remember I remember Big Lil telling me that. I can even remember where I was staying. We had visited the cemetery in Marysville, and we were at the car, and Big Lil told me that at that time. I can even remember where I was when she told me.
Now we know where the name Tim comes from.
Hmm?
Now we know where the name Tim comes from.
Yeah.
Why that keeps popping up.
Yes,
My father's middle name was Timothy.
Yeah.
And my late brother's middle name was Timothy.
Yes.
And I thought they were named after Father Tim, which they probably were, but he was probably named after
Sure,
Tim
he was the
Hannafin.
great grandfather. You see.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of Tims down
A
there.
lot
see?
of Tims.
There was that Tim and his son Tim, and then Father Tim, and then Uncle Johnny's Tim.
Uh-huh.
And then Timmy Woodard.
Tim, yes.
And
And
what
that name
It's
keeps
good
popping
also
up.
to know like dates that they died, because that way you
Well,
go backwards.
I can't, do you know,
What's that?
do you know when your,
Hannafin is buried in Marysville. We can stop there.
okay.
Which
We
is-
were wondering about dates of death for some of our relatives.
That should be on the stone.
Well,
Yes.
the Hannafins are in the stone, right?
Yep.
In Marysville.
Yes.
When did your father and mother, do you know when your father and mother died?
Well, my father died in February '43. I can't remember the date. The
Right
day.
about when my
Yes,
grandmother
And my mother died in
They died
the spring sometime. It was
same year?
no. She died. My father was only 57 when he died. He died with a massive coronary. And my mother was 80, in her 80th year. Her birthday was in November, and she died in April, I think. And I think it was I think it was April. My mother would never tell us when her birthday was.
Do you know what year your mother died?
Now, just a minute. When did I was in Montreal when she died. I think maybe it was 69. Because I went to Ireland as a sister companion with another elderly sister. You read that in my memoirs.
Yes.
And my mother had just passed away. And because I remember I was so glad in a way, because I was worried about going there. I thought she wasn't very well, and I was afraid she'd die while I was over in Ireland. And I didn't want to spoil the trip too, for the other sister to have to come home or something. But she accommodated us. She passed away before we went on the trip, so I think it would
Always
be
thoughtful.
maybe
69,
68 or 69.
And I know my grandmother and grandfather died in the early 40s. I didn't know either one of them.
Annie died just before Dad went into the war.
1941.
I didn't know when any of them died in the States
41,
because see, I was in the
43.
convent.
Annie died, I would say, maybe early 44 or late 43. Right
was
around
like-
in there.
Did she?
It was right
Right.
before. My father was a teenager. It was about maybe a year before
Yes,
he went
that's
into the World War II.
Oh, you see, and I was in the convent in those days, and they never told us anything. We could
Yes.
only write to our parents. We weren't allowed to write to anybody else, and nobody else then wrote us for. This was in the early part. Then after a while, we got so we could write to other people. So you used to write me, and Mary was very good to write. See, my own immediate family though. I was out west for, I told this to Jeannie the other day, over 18 years. I never once got a phone call for my birthday, for Christmas, for anniversary or anything. My mother I never got a letter from my mother. Frances hardly ever wrote. Pat never wrote. The only one that wrote at all was Jovita. You know, she would write to me. That's why I thought we had sort of good rapport,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
Because I used to write, I didn't hear from her when I first went west. When I went west, she was 12 years old. And when she was about 17 or 18, when that picture downstairs was taken, I thought to myself, I wonder what she's like now. I was out there all that time and I hadn't seen her, and I thought, you know, she'd be growing up into a teenager now. And I wrote her a letter and I said, would you please send me a picture? And she sent me that, and I nearly died. You know, I saw how she had grown up and everything. And then we started a little bit of a correspondence, but she'd only tell me things about herself. I never knew when my grandmother O'Connor died, when any of my uncles died. They never told me anything. You know.
Would you know about Mary Lee and Tim Hannafin? I'm assuming they're buried in Canada.
Oh yes, we have they have a great big tombstone at Marysville,
Are we going to see
and it's the Hannafin
We can
tomb.
get dates of death off of the
It's a tombstone, a great big. It's one of the nicest tombstones in the whole
Only the best for us.
cemetery. And it's called the Tim's or the Tim Hannafin. So, and that's
Okay.
where my parents are buried. And that
Your parents are buried there.
Oh, even my
Okay.
parents, my mother and father, and Francis is buried there. Pat's buried there. And then all
Great.
these
we can get to-
Annie and Lizzie and Biddy.
Lizzie and Biddy and Lizzie.
Yeah,
Hannafin girls.
they're all this Hannafin.
Lizzie and
They're all
Lizzie.
buried there.
They're all
Now, as you
Good.
go into the cemetery, but you know where it is.
I haven't been over there since you and I went.
I know.
That's been a while
So
ago.
we might need a little.
You've
direction.
been there, haven't you?
I've been there, yeah. And she and I stopped one time when we
both
came
did,
over,
and I took a picture.
and we went in. And we
Yeah.
took a picture of the stone, but I mean, that's
been a
one
long
of the
time
first
ago.
times we came
Well,
over,
there
so
was-
I'm not.
Well, I remember a big Lil being with us one time when we went down there, and because I remember her saying a prayer. She said, well, we should say a prayer for all these people here, and we said a prayer while we were there.
Now,
Did we go through the side gate?
I can't
Remember?
remember.
No, Shirley wouldn't have been there that time.
No,
but
she and I stopped there
Her and
going
I
home
went.
one time.
You what?
She and I stopped at the
Right.
cemetery. One of the first
But-
times that she and I came over together.
We need
Oh,
a little
did you?
direction here, Agnes.
But what
just
I
to
was
make
saying,
sure.
when you go into that cemetery,
Yeah.
seems like we went in a side gate, didn't
I
we?
can't even remember. You're
Well, there. I don't know what it's
I
like.
don't know if
I don't know
we can
what
find
it's
the
like
stone
now.
now. That's the
But
thing.
there's a gate there by the old church.
Yes, that's all right.
Yeah.
That must be what we went
So
through.
the
I can
gate
remember going
is
through
by
a gate.
There's
the old
the old church is there, and you
Okay.
see you can go in there. There's a gate
Okay,
there
that's-
by the
and
old
then
church,
where do you go?
or you can go over to the old. If you want to drive in, you have to go to the new church, and then drive. There's a roadway
Well, see,
around.
the last time I went, it was probably Evelyn's funeral, is what I think. And we went around the other way and came in. And
Yeah.
that, to me, was a long ways to go.
But when you and
funeral was
I
there at the
went,
church.
Well,
Alright, so-
you can park at that gate and walk in, and
I
it's
think that's what we
it's
did.
not very. You know where the vault is. You see the
We
Hannafin
can find that.
tombstone is not far from the vault. The vault there's a vault there to keep the body if it's in the winter time and
Okay, so
that
how-
grave
And
is.
I remember
how
it being
far from parking?
So that's near the road. You
Yeah,
see, it's
yeah.
near the number 2 highway.
Because we
We
didn't
pull
walk
up-
very far.
No, well, I think we must have pulled up to that metal gate.
We pulled right up and parked and
And went
walked
through
right
the
in,
gate,
and it was right
and
there.
it wasn't that far from.
No, oh, there's.
Can I get it for you?